We're in the book of Acts, chapter 26, and it's lovely to have you. Thank you for dropping in with us. Would you pray for us every now and again that what we do, we can do well? Would you do that? That would encourage us, and that would help us to be more devoted, particularly me, more devoted to what it is that I'm doing, knowing that you were praying to help what we're doing, okay? We're in Acts 26. He's talking to a King Agrippa. And King Agrippa is the son of the fellow who killed James. You remember? And you remember what happened to him? He was down at Caesarea, one of these big get-togethers, and he was dressed all up in a big fancy suit, robes, I mean, and Josephus tells us about it. And he speaks to this big crowd, and there were Phoenicians and that who were down at the big meeting to get some kind of political benefits from him. And so he's up there speaking, and when he's done, the crowd, including that whole big people, group of people who'd come down to get some boons from him, they began to say how wonderful it was. And Luke tells us they said that it wasn't the voice of a man, it was the voice of a God. And Luke says, God, an angel of God, smote him, and he died of worms that ate up with him. Now, Luke doesn't say it happened immediately, but he did die somewhat. I can't remember what Josephus says, weeks or maybe a month or two later, and he died with a whole intestinal tract destruction, you see. So that was his father. Now, this fella knows about all of that stuff that's going on. Paul is happy to know, and maybe, this is all guesswork on my part, maybe he is now looking at a big hitter, one of the leading lights, and he doesn't want to take Paul on because he remembered what happened when his father decided he was going to be a big wheel and an opponent of God. So perhaps that was going on in his mind. He certainly didn't want to disagree with Paul. And he goes on to say to Paul, well, Festus says in 24, he butts in, and in Acts 26:24, Festus said, Paul, with a loud voice, he shouts, Paul, you're beside yourself. Much learning is driving you mad. And Paul says to him, I'm not mad, noble Festus. I speak the words of truth and reason. For the king before whom I speak, 26:26 of Acts, for the king before whom I also speak freely knows these things. For I'm convinced that none of these things escapes his attention, since this thing was not done in a corner. This is not only a shrewd move in his presentation and defense, it puts Agrippa under obligation to really know, and he's crediting Agrippa with understanding and all of that. And that, you know, if Agrippa then would start arguing with Paul, it would look like Agrippa really didn't know as much as Paul, you know, and he doesn't want to lose anything like that. All kinds of possibilities are going on here. Whether any of this is really worthwhile, guesswork. It's certainly the kind of thing that is happening here. Because Paul is now saying one more time to Agrippa, you know what's happening. The story about Jesus Christ and all of that was not done in a corner, he said. And that expression right there becomes helpful. Jesus Christ wasn't a spook. He didn't hang around graveyards. He went to people's wedding feasts. He healed people out in the public. All of this was done. And as John, in his book, as he closes it out, he said, everybody knows about it. And Peter in Acts chapter 10 says to Cornelius, that story, you know, beginning at John the Baptist and all of that, it was everywhere. Everywhere. And so he said, it's not madness. You see what I'm telling you? It all happened. All these things occurred. My own experience when he has told the story about his conversion again, when that's told again, he said, my experience is real. The church people knew it. They knew I wouldn't have been turned around except something extraordinary come after me. 26. For the king before whom I also speak freely knows these things. For I am convinced that none of these things escapes his attention, since this thing has not been done in a corner, and his father's death, the incident down at Caesarea those years, many years ago, about 20, all of that well known to him. Verse 27, King Agrippa, you believe the prophets? I know that you do believe. Then Agrippa said to Paul, you almost persuade me to become a Christian. Now, it's characteristic for people to say this was sarcasm. Maybe it was. Maybe that's even probable. But we don't know that. This fella knows what has happened, knows the story. He's well acquainted with Jesus of Nazareth, the miracles that are being worked in Jesus' name, and a dead man doesn't heal seriously ill people or raise dead people from the dead. All of this he knows, all the stories he knows, all the stuff that would come out from the Sanhedrin, all of that would be well known to him. And it may well be that, almost make a Christian out of me. But he didn't have it. He doesn't have it where he can live up to it or he can say yes to it. One way or another, here he was getting a chance and didn't take it. 28 is what he said. You almost persuade me to be a Christian. And Paul said, I would to God that not only you, but also all who hear me today might become both almost and altogether such as I am. Except, of course, for these chains. I wouldn't want them to be chained. But I would want them more to be on the verge. And you see that almost expression there? That's what leads me to think there's a good reason to think that this man, what he had to say there, though he couldn't pay the price for it, was close. And Paul puts in the almost. 30. When he had said these things, the king stood up, as well as the governor and Bernice, and those who sat with them. And when they had gone aside, they talked among themselves, saying, this man is doing nothing deserving of death or chains. After all of this, the background and all of that, and I'm going to guess that our fella Agrippa was moved by the whole thing. Now they get together. There's no way he's going to go against Paul. He said he's doing nothing worthy of death or chains. Then Agrippa says to Festus, this man might have been set free if he hadn't appealed to Caesar. Verse 27, Acts 26. No, 27:1. And when it was decided that we should sail to Italy, you can almost hear the dun, 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 music in the background. Now we're going to Rome. Now we're going to Rome. Paul had written the Romans way back when. And in chapter 15, he tells them, I'm planning to go to Spain, but I want to go to Spain through yourself. I want to visit you. Said that also in chapter 1. He said, you know, I've wanted to come and see you, to be blessed by you and to be a blessing to you. This is Romans chapter 1. He said, but Satan hindered me again and again. So Paul wanted to go to Rome. And in 15 of Romans, he wanted to go to Rome on his way to proclaim the gospel in Spain. Now he's going to Rome. And he's going, as some wit said, he's going at Roman expense rather than his own. And so now they're heading for Rome. And look what you get. Look what you get in 27. They get a ship to Adramentium. That's a tricky name there, isn't it? 27:2, we put to sea, going along the coasts of Asia. We come to Aristarchus. We come to the coast of Asia. Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica, was with us. The next day we landed in Sidon. And then in verse 4, we sailed under the shelter of Cyprus again. And in 27:5, we sailed over the sea which is of Cilicia and Pamphylia, and we came to Myra, a city of Lycia. Verse 7, 27:7, we arrived with difficulty off Cnidus, the wind not permitting us to proceed. We sailed under the shelter of Crete, off Salmone. And then in verse 8, we came to a place, Fair Havens, near the city of Lasea. Look, what is all this? Verse 12, we came by means, any means they could reach Phoenix, a harbor of Crete. And then 16, running under the shelter of an island called Claudia. And then in 17, we ran aground in Syrtis Sands. Bless me, all these names, all these places, names that I'm having difficulty pronouncing, names that I'll not remember after we finish this little session. Isn't that a real bore? What? We're reading a list of names. The book of Numbers? Is the book of Numbers the most boring book in the Bible? One after another. Long list. They went from here to there, from there to here, and here to there, and there to here, all over the place. Places that the Jews couldn't identify later after the Exodus. That they wouldn't have cared to remember after the Exodus, except those who would quote Scripture word for word from the beginning to the end. All of these names of all of these places. Isn't that a bore of a book? No. And these lists of these different places, what good are they, for pity's sake? Listen, what is it we're seeing when we're reading these names? What is it we're seeing when we read the book of Numbers? and all these different places that nobody knows anything about, never did remember. What? It's not the list of names. That's not where the focus is. The focus should be on the size of the story. Do you know what's happening here in all these different places? A Jew, a believing in Christ Jew, is on his way to the most powerful city in the world. You're not supposed to get lumbered with all the names. You're supposed to sit back, read this text, imagine it if you can. And if you've got a good imagination, you'll see the stuff easily. But whether you can do it well with imagination, this you know. 27:1, it was decided that we should sail to Italy. Italy didn't know what was coming. In Romans chapter 1, verse 16, he said, I'm coming your way. I've got good news. And he says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel because it is God's power to save a world. All he came with was his innocence, his ill health that 2 Corinthians 12 tells us about, and with a message. And you see what's happening here in 27 of Acts? This is drama. If you had $1 jillion and wanted to make a real movie out of this, you would never read Acts 27 the same again. Because if the movie was really, really well done, and you could hear the wind blowing, the Euroclydon that he speaks of in here, and you can see them, and there's Crete over there, and all of these and the islands and running into sandbanks. You would sit there if you had good imagination and if it were done well. It would be absolute drama. But if it were done well, and you kept seeing this little Jewish gentleman with that look in his eye, knows where he's going, and you knew the story, Rome was about to be assaulted. Up his shirt, you might imagine him, he's got these bombs and stuff. And when he gets to Rome, he's going to put them down under the ground in the pillars of the Roman city. He's about to blow Rome. It'll take a while, of course, but he's about to blow Rome to smithereens. For if you go to Rome today, and you see they show you the big amphitheater, the wreck and the ruin, and there are people who get money for saying, this is where they used to kill Christians. See all these different places? Don't stumble over them as I have just done here. Don't stumble over them. Think of, here he is, and watch for this guy walking into Rome. We're in chapter 27, and in verse 14, not long after, a tempestuous headwind arose, a Euroclydon. So, 15, when the ship was caught and could not head into the wind, they just let the wind drive it. Presumably, though the text doesn't say, presumably they turned it around, just hooked it around and let the wind drive it ahead of itself. 16, running under the shelter of an island called Claudia. We secured the skiff with difficulty. Boy, the waves and the wind and all of that, they tied the thing up. When they had taken it on board, they used cables to undergird the ship, fearing lest they should run aground. I said they did, didn't I? I misread the verse. Fearing that they should run aground on Syrtis sands. So they struck sail and so were driven. They had no control. The sea had control. Did it now. It could blow the ship just about anywhere it was blowing. But do you know the water in which they were sailing? You know what the water was? For the Greeks, you know what it was? It was Poseidon. Do you know what it was for the Romans? It was Neptune. The gods rule the sea and the land and the sky and everything else. That was the story. But the sea wasn't Lord and God. Jesus had made it very clear on a number of occasions. There was a storm once, and it was looking like the ship was going to go down, and Christ says, shh, and the storm stopped. And then one day they are out in their boat in a real bad storm, and they see Jesus walking on the water. Genesis tells you that God made the seas, and He divided them, put them in their place. Yeah. Throughout the Scriptures that are written in days when visible, physical temples and shrines, as in many parts of the world still, in the Hindu world, for example, there are gods everywhere, gods being sold in the shops. They're not saying that the God, the statue in the shop is the God, but that the gods make themselves present at times in these when you go to worship. You see, but all of that is going on, and they control things. How stupid it is for all those people. Yeah, right enough, yeah. Us modern people, we can reduce everything to what we see. All we do is describe. We don't explain. I've mentioned to you about the people, the termites are eating their house down, the winds are blowing their house down, the fire gets a hold of their house and burns them down. And they're praying to the gods. Well, I mean, what? I mean, how stupid do you have to be? You can see it's the termites doing the job. It's the wee roaches that are eating this up, and this and that, and the wind is doing. Yeah, well, they know that. You think these people are so blind and deaf and all the rest of it that they don't know that it's the wind and it's the termites. But when we talk like that, they would tell us, you're only describing. There is power behind what you describe. Well, they're still very wrong. Well, I'm not doubting that having all these gods is a blunder. I get that. But I'm wanting to say to moderns today, I don't care. A medical man, I mean a brilliant, skilled medical man or woman, they come and they can tell you, here's how that works, and here's what happens when that happens, and they go in and they do this, that, and the other, and all of that. All they're doing is describing. Here's what follows. Here's what happens. Galaxies collide, the scientists and cosmologists and astronomers tell us. All they're doing And a neuroscientist who gets down into the depths of the brain and all of that with all the equipment, they see these things happening, and what they come away with, they say, this is what happens. We're not denying that this is what happens. This is only description. What they cannot do and do not do is they describe it, and they would want to say, and of course Wolf Singer and other guys like him say there isn't anything else. It's that. It's physics. It's chemistry. It's hormones. It's muscle, blood. It's this and tissue and all the rest of it. No, that's what you see. You describe only what you see. But to say that there's no power that keeps the laws of physics, that holds the world together, that created the world in the first place and sustains all that's going on, you can't do that because you don't see that. You reduce it all to this, and this. Look, what happens when this and then this, and they tell us that, and we say, that's true. That's true, we get that. Oh, you must be right, certainly. Okay, get that. And what then? Well, that's all there is. No, it's all there is that you can see physically and observe, that you can touch or smell or whatever it is that you can do. All that you have is physical, what we call physical laws, physical sequences and the like. You can predict things. You know what's going to happen here? When I do that, here's what's going to happen. And they can do that. They can do that because they've seen it happen over and over and over and over and over again. But they cannot say and should not say. But there's no power that has given formation and harmony to the laws. That they cannot do. And it one more time, it was he died in 2017. Peter Berger, the sociologist, a seriously prominent sociologist, he said, remember this. When sociologists tell you what is happening, they are reporting, they're describing, they are not explaining. Beyond what they see, beyond what they touch and taste and all of that, all of these skilled people, they know what they're doing within those limits. Once they step beyond those limits, they're out of their league. Yeah. A seed. Get a seed. I don't know anything about seeds. I don't know what grows what. I suppose rose seeds grow rosy. Yeah, that makes sense. Here you get a wee rose seed. A wee rose seed? I think rose seeds grow out of, roses grow out of seeds. Do they? Yeah, I think so. Anyway, whatever it is, a potato seed, I don't care what it is. You get the wee seed. You've got these microscopes and all that, you see. And you slice it, the seed open. And what do you see? You see the innards of the seed. It's all physical. It's all physical. And if you get a really serious microscope, you begin to see its inner structure. You see atoms. You see photons and electrons and all the wee elementary particles. At least you see an image that comes back to you. You see all of that. It's what you see. But you don't know why or how it is that this thing grows. There's a power in a seed that isn't seeable. You can see the inner structures and all of that in the tiniest, but you cannot see the power. How does it come that they live? How do they grow? How do they come to be? And on and on and on. And so we get guesswork from all And we're not unhappy about all the skilled people that can do all this stuff about biology and microbiology and whatever else. We're not unhappy about that. God has given humans all this great skill and capacity to be creative and grow. But they can't outgrow this. There's a power behind all that's going on. Yeah? Thank you.